Hello, welcome. Thank you for tuning in today. First of all, just a quick heads up. Thank you very much if you are watching this. We have finally made it to spring. We are in our last unit of the year, so that's always an exciting thing to think about. Our topic today is two different Americas, life in the North and life in the South. Before we start, what are we talking about? When we say the North, we basically mean this part of the country right here. And the South, we're talking about this part of the country right here. At this time, around the year 1800 to 1860, the West is not really in play yet. We're mostly talking about the eastern half of the United States. Okay, basically we're going to look at life in the North and compare it to life in the South. We have 5 different categories: earning a living, work ethic, religion, education, and opinion of the other. And what that means is, what did the North think about the South, and what did the South think about the North? So I'm just going to take you through each one. We're going to start off with earning a living. Life in the North was dominated by factories and large and small businesses. They were the most important things to the economy. Immigrants were coming over from Europe. A lot of young women were going to work in the new factories in the new cities, and the North was very much into business and finance. In the South, it was the complete opposite. They had a very strict social hierarchy in the South. A small percentage, and we're talking like 2 to 5% of rich white planters, the plantation owners, dominated the economy of the South. They got mega rich by having lots and lots of slaves. What was much more common, about 30% of white people in the South were small farmers. They may have owned a few slaves, but not very many. They were doing okay, but not getting by. Not getting super rich, sorry. By far, the biggest two groups in the South: poor white farmers who owned no slaves, and slaves themselves who were at the complete bottom of the social hierarchy. And basically, everything in the South was about farming. They were almost 100% agricultural. Next up, work ethic. The North, because they were so into business and technology and industry, that's where they came up with the expression, time is money. You have to work hard all the time, don't waste a second. But interestingly enough, they also didn't believe in showing off your wealth. You were supposed to keep your money a secret and live a simple lifestyle. People in the South wanted to be a rich Southern gentleman. They wanted to be a planter. They wanted to have other people do their work all day so they could relax, enjoy the good life. And in the South, they were all about showing off your money. If you were rich, you had to build a really big, huge mansion. You had to dress in the finest clothes. You had to have expensive horses and carriages. And you had to have big, fancy parties. Everyone in the South wanted to be one of these very few super rich people, but of course most people weren't. But this was always the goal: to be a rich Southern gentleman, to live in a big house, and to show off your wealth. In the North, religion was still very, very important on a daily basis to most people in the North. People were urged to study the Bible. People were urged to follow the Bible. It was still frowned upon to have too much fun. You weren't supposed to enjoy yourself very much. You were supposed to work hard, to pray, to live a simple life, and to keep kind of God at the center of everything you did. On the South, religion was very important on Sundays. The Sunday service was still kind of the center of the week. But in the South, a lot of times religion was often used as a tool. Religion was used to justify the social order. Rich people said they were rich because they were chosen by God. They used the Bible to even justify slavery, to explain why some people could own and exploit others. So religion was often used much more as a tool in the South, where in the North, religion was more of, you should live your life a certain way. Our next topic is education. People in the North put a very high value on education. Reading was important, so you were able to read the Bible. Math was important because if you were going into business, you needed to know how to, keep track of your expenses and your profits. So education in the North was very much in demand. We had the first public schools in the North. If you remember, we talked about Thomas Mann a couple units ago. He created the Common School movement, which became the public school movement. So in the North, you were much more likely to go to school, to go to a public school, and you might not make it to college, but you would definitely have a good chance of going through elementary school and maybe even high school. In the South, education was not considered to be that important for most people. If you were a slave, you were prohibited from getting an education. It was against the law. If you were a poor or even a middle-class farmer in the South, you didn't really need education. You were working in the farm all day. You had to be strong. You had to be tough. But you didn't really have to have that much education. The very, very rich, those mega-rich plantation owners, would hire private tutors to come into their house and to educate their sons. But for the most part, most people in the South were uneducated. Very many people in the South could not read, whereas by the 1800s, most people in the North could at least read and do basic math. Our last topic, what did they think about each other? And not surprisingly, they did not have very favorable opinions about each other. People in the North, they basically looked at most people in the South kind of as, oops, sorry, I did that wrong for you guys. I'm going to back that up. People in the North considered people in the South to be backwards, to be uneducated, to be ignorant, and to be totally corrupted by slavery. Most people in the South were assumed to be cruel, to be mean, to treat their slaves as inhuman. So people in the South were viewed by people in the North as kind of backwards, uneducated, cruel slave owners. People in the South looked at the people in the North as weaklings, as city folk, as not real Americans. People in the North were considered to be, kind of, we would call them maybe kind of a dandy, or kind of a not a very manly man. And people in the South thought that the North were always trying to butt in. They were always getting in their business, trying to tell the South what to do. And people in the South basically wanted to be left alone. They didn't want the North telling them how to treat their slaves. They didn't want the North telling them how to run their businesses or plantations. And we had a lot of sectionalism in the 1800s. People in the North, people in the South really thought of each other as separate. I would not call myself an American. I would say I'm a Southerner. Or I would not call myself an American. I'm from the North. I'm a Yankee. So we really had this idea of sectionalism dominating the country in the 1800s. So the whole reason we talk about this, just kind of put it all into perspective. We look at the people of the North, we look at people of the South, and we look for the comparisons. How are they different? How are they living a life that is different than someone on the other side of the Mason-Dixon line? So these differences lead to sectionalism, and it is one of the major causes of the Civil War. People in the North, people in the South living very different lives and having very unfavorable, negative opinions of each other. Thank you guys very much. Bring this lecture back into class with you, and we will use it there.